As another year passes into winter chill, I find myself musing about how any individual is placed in the progression of events we call history. Someone once told me that she wished her teachers had spoken about the past the way I did. Her comment was flattering, but even if it has been a lifelong interest, what do I really know about history? For that matter, what does history itself mean beyond those lifeless, endless dates, places, and events that are dry as dust to anyone who has not had at least a glimmer of recognition of how they affect our lives, for whom history has never been more than flipping the page of a calendar or remembering how to date a check? I was born in the late 50s, with the Vietnam War, Watergate, the Iran hostage crisis, stagflation, the neoliberal counter-revolution, all echoing in the background like static, but remembered through the prism of personal experience, the historian's notion of significance, and the media's lecturing distortions. For me, the anti-war movement will always be my sister's frightened phone call from Washington when a demonstration in which she participated was broken up violently by the police. The first oil embargo is a snowy dark, waiting for the school bus, while the second is a line of cars in the bright, warm sunshine at a gas station on Wilshire Boulevard during my first visit to Los Angeles. The morning of September 11th, 2001, I was so groggy when I logged on to my computer that I wondered for a moment if the horrendous photos of destruction in New York were some kind of literal nightmare from which I had not awakened. Such fragments undoubtedly influenced me, and in a sense are part of me. But are my memories and actions in any way enough to place me in history? Giving much thought to the question risks being overwhelmed. The most trivial action gets weighed down with significance so that I trip over the moving parts of daily decisions. Even clearing the cobwebs with my daily brew becomes a matter of different beans, flavorings, means of preparation, cold or hot, and so on, raising the question of why something as trivial as getting a cup of coffee should be so complicated. I may think that the results are exactly the way I like it, but are they fundamentally superior? Why do I expect such complexity from a cup of coffee? Never mind the cream and sugar, the means to stir, which cup to put it in, all the peripheral details that I assume will be there without asking where they came from, how they got here, how many people might have handled them ad infinitum. If for some reason my usual recipe were unavailable, I would no doubt adjust, but in doing so, I would expose the implicitly ephemeral nature of the endeavor. The choice is made on the compulsion to participate in cycles of consumption that require differentiation to distinguish one product from another, reinforcing the mystique of choice, placing me as little more than a monad floating on the froth of global consumerism, turning life into one big menu. Is that the historical truth? The very question is itself a first world problem made up of a demographer's list of prerequisites for participation in the cycle of exchange. Age, gender, nationality, class, education, the familiar litany of impersonal categories are used to tally a profile for each of us. Certain of their position in history, moralists transform attributes calculated to sell into reified categories. They point out that only someone with sufficient means to worry about the quality of food in a society that caters to luxurious consumption in conscienceless disregard for the plight of others or from where it originates would ask such self-absorbed questions. Yet the categories possess no inherent value. They acquire meaning only in aggregate. They are limited as historical description because they are themselves so determined by time and place. Is there any universal meaning in middle-class, college-educated, early 21st century male American that can be determinative, that has any evaluative sense beyond the moralist desire that it should? If marketing at least suggests the complexity of human identity, its descriptions can only be refined with more objective data without ever answering the subjective need to know what any of the terms mean beyond their existence as predetermined categories. Indeed, the more data there are, the further any notion of value recedes in a welter of obscure, irrelevant information as categories pile up like a house of cards waiting to collapse. Karl Marx could foretell the end of history because he defined it as the war between social classes. Once the communist utopia had been achieved, conflict would cease with the disappearance of class, thus bringing his notion of history to an end. Unlike the demographer's emotionally vacant list of characteristics, Marx elevated one general social grouping, class, into a transcendent category that overrides individual exceptions and subordinates other considerations. Doing so makes it possible for qualitative assessments to override specious complexity. The label middle class, for example, used as a transcendent description, has moral and social connotations that help to place the subject within a system of meaning and classification, and thus the subject's place in history, which is obviously the greatest disadvantage of such an approach because such transcendent categories run roughshod over exceptions with the force of a moral rectitude that passes for meaning. Other transcendent categories, race, gender, sexual orientation, whatever, merely substitute one essentialism for another, thus guaranteeing discrimination against individuals who deviate from the description regardless of whether the deviations, much less the abuse, are correct. At its best, informed generalization strives toward the typical. Types provide shape and meaning to the particular, and as long as they are recognized as abstractions created for that purpose, they aid interpretation. Interpretations, nonetheless, are almost inevitably mistaken for explanations. I often feel that being of mixed race awakened me early to the seductive simplicity of neat definitions. I was once aware of a faculty position at a major university which was looking for an Asian faculty member, for example. The person who made me aware of the opening told me this even though, as she put it, I didn't identify as Asian. Since I have never denied my heritage, I was struck by her assumption that there were certain attitudes and characteristics that qualified one as truly Asian. Since this person was not Asian herself, why did she feel comfortable in making that characterization? Was it because I did not wear a chip on my shoulder about my ethnicity, that I did not fit her image of true identity? The category had more validity for her than the reality of my refusal to be ghettoized by it. Not that I deny that I exist in history. I just make no pretense of knowing what space I occupy, and have little faith that anyone else knows better. I cannot believe in an inevitable march forward to infinite human progress and happiness. History is more like a dilapidated jalopy, sputtering and stalling towards a destination no one sees or knows, while the occupants fight over the steering wheel and where they should head. To find a position in history, I must negotiate the contradictions that life throws at me as honestly as possible, and accept those sides of myself that may be on the wrong side, if not today, then possibly in the eyes of future values that I cannot anticipate. I should not fool myself into thinking that only the best parts of my makeup influence my behavior and expectations. Indeed, to insist on identifying myself with only the good is itself a flagrant, self-conferred act of privileged rectitude. Self-aware art may be the answer for those of us lucky enough to have it as an option. Yes, lucky. For surely chance also figures in individual options as much as social and historical determinations. When we know the contradictions we embody, we can harness a dynamic, constantly competing struggle without endorsing any value as revealed truth, but embracing both our strengths and weaknesses, recognizing a world larger than ourselves while giving back to it the richness of sensuous experience that is an artist's gift to enjoy, understand, and enhance. For if history is a rusting wreck, life is more like a jumble of broken glass from which an incomplete picture may emerge. Even if it can never be fully realized, the effort to make something of the fragments promises an illicit joy in bringing the hidden into the light. To thrive on life's capacity to exceed all simple answers and art's incomplete, never-ending effort to understand it is my position in history.